Okay, welcome everyone. It's so fantastic to see so many people joining us. My name is Amy Leino, and I am the Individualized Learning and Belonging Lead at the International School of Helsinki. I'm also an honored member of the Special Interest Group for Inclusive Education. And I'm extremely proud today to introduce our speakers for this webinar, Marie and Ken. But first, just to share a little bit about our special interest group, we're a small but mighty group who are kind of focused with ECIS on inspiring and providing professional development to improve skills. And Eleni from our group is joining us today. Hello, Eleni.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
A few weeks ago, we were able to host a webinar about universal design for learning and Ludia, a tool to help teachers unlock the power of UDL learning for all students. And we're following up today with a session with Ken and Marie focused on co-teaching. So unlocking the power of co-teaching to foster inclusion and universal design for learning. I am so lucky to be able to work together with Ken and Marie every day to see the magic that they bring to classrooms and to professional learning for our teachers and inspired learning for our students. Marie, originally from the United States, has a range of experience as a special education teacher and learning support teacher, and currently is our PYP and MYP learning coordinator. Working EY to grade 7, and Ken is our MYP and DP learning support coordinator, working with grades 8 through 12. Ken, originally also from the United States, has a range of experience as a learning support teacher and as an assistive technology guru. And today I hope we are able to provide for you some really inspiring and concrete practical ways in which we can unlock the power of inclusion and universal design for learning. So Ken and Marie, I will let you take it away from here. Oh, I do want to just really quickly also just remind that if we are talking about anything related to confidentiality with your teachers or your students, please be really mindful of that, not to disclose any personal information. And we'll provide opportunity to ask questions and engage together and then follow up at the end. So thank you, everyone, and welcome. Ken and Marie.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad that everyone can join us today for this webinar. Just one thing before we get started, it'd be really helpful if folks have access to a smartphone, because we're going to be, as part of the presentation, we're going to have a couple opportunities for interactive polling and things along those lines. So it'd be nice if you had a smartphone close by.
Okay, let's jump in. I'm Marie Brodrick, as Amy introduced. I'm the PYP and MYP coordinator.
And I'm Ken Allen. I'm the MYP and DP coordinator for learning support.
And we are going to share our screen with you now. Yay!
And both of us have had over the years, lots of experience with co-teaching. We've seen co-teaching, I think, in kind of amazing when it's done really well. And also we've been in other situations where it's been maybe not, it needs a little bit, it just a little bit to be desired. So I think we're going to share some things that we've, gathered from our experience over the years, and also weaving it together with UDL. So before we get started, we just want to point out this one quote here. I think it's a good one. Will co-teaching solve all the education's problems? Obviously not. But in the hands of two teachers who are committed, co-teaching enables them to create an excellent, joyful classroom community in which adults can teach and students can learn at their best. And I fell on this quote because I really do think it encapsulates why co-teaching can be so powerful. At its best, it can truly be just a wonderful experience for the teachers as well as the students, and learning where learning is just really happening on both ends.
So as you saw from the title of our presentation, we're trying to encapsulate a lot in this hour today. But ultimately, I think our goal for all of you is to have you stop and think and reflect on the practice that you have in your classroom, with other teachers that you work with your students, and hopefully walk away with something new to think about or something new that you can try in your classrooms. So here are some of today's objectives. As I mentioned, we are talking about things like co-teaching and UDL, and in and of themselves, we could spend hours and hours and hours talking about any of these topics. So when we do bring up a new sort of topic, we're going to quickly define it, but we're not going to go really, really deep into what UDL is, for example, just because we're limited on time and we want to get to some of these more big picture items today. But here are our goals. We're going to define some of these things, examine best practices, look at various models of co-teaching, some practical strategies for implementing and developing a co-teaching relationship, and also demonstrate how co-teaching can help facilitate universal design for learning in classrooms.
And our goal is to not talk at you, because we've attended webinars where, you know, people have just talked the entire time at us. So we're going to hopefully get some conversation. So you're invited to, you're going to be invited to join this webinar and add to the conversation. We're going to co-create this together. And here's how we're going to start. So what comes to your mind when you hear the words co-teaching? So I'm using this. So what you want to do is get your phone out and scan the QR code. And hopefully, if this is working correctly, it's going to start designing a word cloud with all the words that are, there we go, it's working. So the words that are more common are going to be showing up larger, and the words that are maybe only put up like once or twice will be a little bit smaller. So we'll give this a few minutes to see kind of what our group here, how we define co-teaching.
Collaboration's coming in really big.
Co-construct. And if for those of you who don't know, this is there's a lot of apps and things along this. My favorites, it's called Slido. And Slido is a great UDL tool for engagement. It can turn any presentation into a more interactive one. And as we all know, for UDL, having more engagement is good for all learners. So here is one way that you can incorporate this into your teaching or your co-teaching. All right, we'll give a couple more, because right now it looks like 26 folks, but 28. And I'm wondering with folks all around the world if it's taking a little bit more time for things to match up.
So many great things coming through. Co-construct, communication, teamwork to support students. Collaboration's our #1 word right now. Teamwork is also really large. Synergy is coming in a little bit larger.
And I'm noticing also challenging. Yes, it's certainly co-teaching can be challenging at times, but also rewarding. So, and we're gonna make sure that we are able to see the chat box here, but let's have it a little bit, so that we're not, because it's what everyone's seeing. Okay. All right, let's give another couple minutes. Give me those. Okay, so what is really standing out is collaboration. And yeah, in its essence, that's really what co-teaching is.
And we'll talk about that a lot later.
Yeah. All right, so moving on. I know if you're adding to it, that's great, but we're just going to move on in the sake of time here, making UDL possible. I love that. Okay. And here is the official definition of co-teaching.
Co-teaching is defined as two teachers sharing the planning, organization, delivery, and assessment of instruction, as well as the physical space.
And as we will demonstrate later, there's a lot of different ways that co-teaching can look. And so we'll go through that in a little bit here. I keep on hitting the space bar. Here we go. But before we kind of get started, I just want to go through like kind of a brief history of co-teaching. I think it first kind of started popping up really with constructivist education, back with Montessori, Maria Montessori and John Dewey in the early 20th century. Though in the 1980s, Vygotsky had, had the idea of collaborative partnerships, kind of moving away from the teacher-centered model of instruction, teachers the expert and students are learning, to more learner-centered instruction. So it started opening up a little bit, but co-teaching didn't really start taking off kind of in gaining momentum until the 1990s. And that was with the inclusive education movement. And because truly it was seen at the time as a way to get specialists and general education folks together in collaboration and for the benefit of all students. And as we all know, co-teaching today it's seen as a common teaching model, just looking around at, especially in international education. So I'm sure many of you are co-teaching. And if you look at majority of job, learning support job applications, like part of the, what schools are wanting are people with experience with co-teaching. The one thing I do want to highlight that this one model it's called the co-teaching cycle. This was, developed in 2012 by Sherratt and Follin, is that for co-teaching to truly be successful, it needs to continually involve co-planning, co-teaching, co-reflection, and co-debriefing. So I think what a lot of folks think of when they think of co-teaching is they just think it's just like, okay, two teachers in the room teaching. And yes, but unless folks are constantly planning together, that's the meat of it, as we'll discuss. It's planning together, but also reflecting and debriefing together. Then it's really the teaching is just not going to be as effective. And here's kind of a great model of that and how it's a cycle. So there's co-planning, and so I won't read all this to you, but basically, yeah, you should be planning together. And this doesn't always have to occur synchronously. You can certainly, with a lack of time these days, we're all being pulled in 8,000 directions. But with technology, there's a lot of planning you can do just on using technology. And then there's the co-teaching part, of course. But then also, I think this is perhaps the most important piece of it, is co-reflecting. So like, how did that go? After there was a lesson that was, looking at your summative data together, evaluating how is the relationship going with your co-teacher, because it is a relationship. And same thing with co-debriefing. So just kind of making sure that you get all the stakeholders involved at your school. So administrative buy-in and all those things. So it's, co-teaching is a lot and it can be massive, but it also can be so successful when all these are in place. Okay.
As Ken mentioned, this is co-teaching is terminology that's being used in many, many schools. I know in my personal experience, every school that I've worked at has at the minimum claimed that they're using a co-teaching model. Often what I find is that when that happens, there's a lack of understanding from many people in the building about what that means and what it can mean. I think a common misconception around co-teaching is that especially in terms of like a classroom teacher, whether that's lower school or subject area teacher in upper school, in collaboration with a learning support teacher or an EAL teacher, what many people kind of default think of that as, well, there's the classroom teacher leading the lesson at the front, and then the support teacher floating around. And so one of the things that I really like to bring awareness to many people is that this is not a one size model. This does not have to look one way. We have so many opportunities to play and find what works best for the partnership between two teachers, but also what is best on a day-to-day level for our students, to provide them the best instruction and the best means of engaging with the information we are trying to teach them. So we're just going to take a couple minutes. As I said at the beginning, we're not going to deep dive into this. There's a lot of resources online about different models of co-teaching, but just quickly reminding us what are some alternative structures we can use, and then also when and why might we use them when we're thinking about planning for our classrooms. Why doesn't that work right? So the first one is one teaching, one observing. This is when one teacher is at the front of the classroom or working the lesson with the whole class, and then the other teacher is off to the side, usually fairly discreetly making observations. There are a lot of really good uses of this when you're collecting data, specifically around behaviors. As learning support teachers, we like to use this for ILP or IEP data collection, but it can also be really helpful to observe student engagement. It can be helpful to plan for future instruction.
Yeah, and if it's in a non-evaluative way, it's a great way for a teacher to, even in a co-teaching relationship that has other uses other models, for one day just doing this, right? So if you're partnering with, if you're doing co-teaching with another teacher and you're using a different model most of the time, doing this every now and then is actually a great way to kind of evaluate lightly how it's going. Like when one teacher is teaching, what are the students doing in that bit?
But not just what the students are doing. I actually have a really interesting example of this one. So
Yeah.
I had a teacher that I was working with, reflecting on her DEIJ practices, and she asked me if I could document how many times students were raising their hand and then which student she was calling on.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of really cool ways to use this. But primarily thinking about students' behavior, engagement, collection, stuff like that.
Another kind of model for co-teaching is, and I think this one is the one that tends to be the default a lot, one teacher teaching, one teacher assisting. And so one teacher leads instruction and the other float and assists. So I think where this comes into why this happens so often, especially I think in like middle school and high school levels, is because often, a support teacher doesn't feel like they have the content expertise to be leading instruction, of course. And so it kind of goes to this more default role. And some of the benefits of this is students can get that quiet support on the side, from the floating teacher. But I think one of the things that you got to watch out for, which I think a lot of us who've been in this role have had exposure to, is it kind of creates an interesting like dynamic between the generalist and the specialist. And sometimes, the students don't always see that supporting teacher as, a lead teacher in the classroom, even though they are a teacher, right? And so I think in this situation, there's a lot of strategies that can be put in place to help support this kind of going a little seamlessly. Yeah.
As I'm talking about our next model, parallel teaching, one thing also just to note for people that have maybe arrived a little bit later, or just something for people to be aware of, Ken and I do a lot of talking from our own perspective, and that perspective is as a learning support teacher. But I also want to remind everyone here that this is not just relationships between support specialists and classroom teachers. This can also be between, an art teacher and a language arts teacher. This can be between two classroom teachers, two fourth grade teachers, whatever. The combinations of people are endless. Our perspectives come from learning support because that's our background and our specialty. So caveat before we move on. Our next model is parallel teaching. This one you do not see quite as often as some of the other ones, but a class is divided pretty equally and both teachers instruct. I think what scares some people about this model is there does need to be a lot of trust between the co-teachers. Both people need to be very confident in the subject area content, and they both they both need to be really confident. And I know sometimes, again, from a learning support perspective, if you're pushing into, especially I think of upper school teachers, and they're like, I have all this content I need to get through, there can be some hesitation to give others the trusting another teacher enough to say, you're also going to deliver the information in the way that I will. Really helpful when you want to work with a smaller group and move through material more quickly.
Mm-hmm. And just so folks are aware, on our little diagrams here, which are a little fuzzy, you know, the green are of course the teachers. Yeah. Okay. Station teaching, and where this is where each teacher provides instruction in different aspect of content, and then the students kind of rotate through, right? So they go through stations. And I think this happens a lot more with younger students, and I think it happens quite a bit with younger students. However, I do kind of want to you know, I guess encourage those who are working with students in the middle school and in high school or MYP, DP, depending on how you call it, to try station teaching with the older students, because it can be an extremely effective way of teaching, of co-teaching with older students, and especially because I think one of the things about this is it does require a little bit more planning, for sure, right? And so I think that's why it doesn't always happen. But however, when it does happen, what I think the magic of it is that if one teacher doesn't feel like they have the content expertise, I feel like that can be kind of prepared for in advance with the station, right? So you can kind of tease that out while you're beforehand with the planning, so that way you know, every teacher can add to the situation. And I think also in the UDL lens, this can be a very powerful approach for co-teaching, because you can have different forms of engagement at the different stations. Oh, and Vicky agreed this is a powerful co-teaching tool in the secondary school. So thank you for adding that, Vicky. Yeah. It can be quite powerful.
We're trying to be aware of our chat box as well.
Yeah, but the problem is the chat box is always, it's kind of in the way here. So sorry for that. Okay, moving on to alternative teaching,
which is also known as small group teaching. So one teacher takes the majority of the class while another teacher takes a smaller group. I think this is also one of the default support models of co-teaching, but it also has a lot of really strong functions. Another thing I like to keep in mind when I'm talking with teachers, and I often remind them when I'm working with a teacher, is even if you're using a model like alternative teaching or small group, it doesn't have to be the classroom teacher that takes the big group. The classroom teacher can also work with a small group, and it's such a beautiful and powerful opportunity for them to get to spend some specialized time with a small group of students, whether that's for pre-teaching, reteaching, or enrichment. There aren't any, as I mentioned in the beginning, there's no set roles in these as well, so it's worth playing around with.
And the one thing I do want to point out is that one thing that where this can kind of, what I see happening, you know, where this could easily go is kind of anti-inclusion, where those students end up being taken out of the room, you know, by the separate teacher. And so this is kind of like a danger, because like, while it might be important at times to, you know, offer the small group instruction in a space without that's like in a different space, you know, but we don't want to have it becoming that's an alternative placement, right? And so it's very important that if this is the model that that you're using, that we rotate the students who are in that small group often, and the teachers as well, just to kind of vary it. And so it's not ever seen like, oh, these students go with this teacher and they leave the room, right? We have it, we kind of never want that definition.
That's part of that reflecting and coming back. Part of that cycle is reflecting on what students need what at what point, and that is why the co-planning, which we'll be talking about much more in a little while, is so important.
Yep. Okay. Team teaching. And this is essentially where both teachers, I'm going to move this because, yeah. No.
Way again.
Yeah. Both teachers are providing instruction at the same time. And so when I first did my first co-teaching experience, this was the model that was used, and it was beautiful. So when it goes well, team teaching can be really, really amazing because you're jumping, one teacher's talking and the other person's chiming in, and then, that one teacher's, roaming and supporting the other teacher. So it can be a really, really powerful model. But the caveat is that you need to be confident with the content, right? So it requires a little bit more work on that side. Yeah. So anything else on that one?
It's the most challenging to pull off, but when it's done, it's also the most rewarding in the end. And at least as from like a teacher perspective, to me, I love it.
Yeah, and I think it's rewarding for the teacher because you're not alone. You're teaching with somebody else. Okay.
Moving on. We're going to quickly take a second and talk, well, not quickly. This is a lot of what we're talking about now moving forward. The barriers preventing co-teaching. When you talk to people about why they're not co-teaching, there's two big things that come up a lot. The first, trust and buy-in. You can't co-teach by yourself. That's co-indicates establish buy-in with other teachers at your school and develop trusting relationships with them. The second thing that we're going to touch on and talk about, time. Co-teaching doesn't happen magically. Time does need to be carved out to do so. And we'll talk about maybe ways that you're already finding time in your schools, but also, the kind of things you might have to do to find time.
All right, we're going to move on here looking at you a lot. So this is going to be a little bit different, going to be a word cloud. This is going to be where what you write will pop up kind of like a text. So it might be, we weren't expecting so many people to, I mean, it's great that we have, I think, 70. So, but if you can right now, you can write a sentence or two about ways that you've created buy-in and trust with staff members.
So thinking about another teacher that you've worked with.
It doesn't have to be your co-teacher if that's your situation. But like, how have you created buy-in and trust? Giving the other a chance and communication. After rates. So I think that's where, yeah, we'll talk about that. Positive comments, yes.
Building a shared vision. What do we want for our students?
Professional agreements. Let's talk about that too. Yeah.
Finding things that we like in comments. That's just like a personal level. Reflection. There's a lot of communication coming up. Finding time to plan together. Shared expectations is coming up a lot too. Yes, yes, yes. Establishing our why. Why are we there? Why are we doing this? Naming your expertise. Yes, own the things that you're good at. And also acknowledge the things that your peers are good at as well. We have some people in the chat box. Respect and positivity, communication, reflecting, communicating, making time with cover for the teacher. Yes. So it's not happening in the back of your classroom when there's kids in there.
Yeah, I think that's really, while people are typing this, making that time is like the reality of the situation. It's going to be a rare school, a rare situation where you have a common prep period. And even if you have that, you might not have the same preparing for a class style, right? So finding time together in asynchronously, computer meeting together, whatever, to at least have a touch base and do some common planning.
I like coffee time is us time.
Yeah.
Always participate in planning. Yes. Essential agreements. Yes. Just give it 20 more seconds and then we'll jump in. Bouncing ideas off each other, making sure everyone's involved in decision making. We talk about co-teaching at PD meetings, so you're finding that
So you have
time.
admin buy-in for co-teaching.
Transparency, recognition, appreciate efforts. Yes.
And so I think one of the main things that if your school is, if your school is putting energy into supporting a co-teaching model, then you need to put in the work by finding that time to meet together. So it would be wonderful if it's great that where it's provided by the school, but if not, looking at your calendars, when are we going to be able to do this? All right.
Okay. Thank you all for sharing. You can, but we're going to move on to our next slide as well. Yeah, you had great ideas. So here's some pictures. This is, we're just going to take a moment to share some experiences we had and some strategies that we use to connect with people. There's a couple pictures of me in here. Up in the left-hand corner, that's Kevin Jones. He did share these pictures with me, and I would like to take a second and appreciate and thank him for that. I used to co-teach third grade math with him previously. We did that for a couple of years together. And he was always very good about having his camera out to take photos. So he has a lot of pictures of me and there's fewer of him, but I love this picture in the corner because I think it captures the joy that we felt working together. But I also want to start by saying that, like, yeah, there's a lot of smiles and joy in that top picture, but it wasn't always that way. When I first started working with Kevin, it was out of necessity. He had students that I needed to support. And so my schedule had me going into his classroom. And I know a personal mistake that I'm trying to be inclusive and be pushing into classrooms and co-teaching is kind of skipping the communication piece and assuming that the person that I'm working with has the same understandings as me. And guess what? Every single time that's happened, it's just been an absolute bomb. And there were points in time when working with Kevin where that happened. We were not communicating. It was not working. But someone gave me this like really incredible piece of information or piece of advice once about connecting with other people, specifically with other teachers. It was our head of school here at ISH, at the International School of Helsinki, at Kathleen Negley. And she had said to me, well, if you're trying to connect and get buy-in from a student, how would you do that? You can take those same principles that you use to connect with students to build trust with them and apply them to your peers. And it's really stuck with me in the 5 years since she said that. And so when I'm trying to establish trust with a coworker, it's through, making sure I'm going out of my way to pop into their classroom, even when I'm not supposed to be there. Do you need anything? Can I help you with something? What do you need from me right now? Really taking the time to listen. As many of you have said, and I think as Ken has also said, taking the time to say, what does it look like when we're together? What are our roles? What are our agreements on little things like allowing students to go to the bathroom, or just these little minute things that everyone has these routines in their classrooms, but it's when you're one teacher. So what do these routines look like when there's two teachers, and who does that fall to, and what does that look like, and how are we communicating in the same way? And it's the best advice I've ever been given. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, so when I did co-teaching, we first met to kind of go over our styles with teaching, and we talked about that first. And then we also talked about a lot of the little things that I think, don't seem to matter much, but I think they do matter a lot. And that was, when, in Manage Back or whatever, it wasn't Manage Back at the time, but, where did teachers' names appear? Is it only one lead teacher? Who's doing grades? Whose names are on the door? and because I came in, I was the special educator, and she was the general educator, and so I was really worried that I wouldn't be seen as one of the teachers, that in the same way that the students would see her, and I let her know that from the very beginning, and so and she's like, oh, I never really thought about that, and so because I shared that with her, because I communicated that with her, I think we were both conscious about that, and then she was super conscious about that in giving me opportunities to take the lead, because I didn't really have the content area at the time, and that's kind of what helped that partnership grow. So I just want to stress as much as possible, and I'm sure everyone's aware of this, but the co-teaching it's a relationship, but it's a different relationship, you know. It's more than someone that you see in the staff room. Hey, good morning, how was the weekend? It's really a interwoven relationship, and you need to have communication and and a shared understanding, and from the get-go, and if you don't have that, then it can really go sideways.
And yeah, as I was saying, like if you're trying to establish a different relationship or rebuild a relationship that maybe wasn't what it needs to be, holding yourself accountable and proving to that person that you are going to show up and you are going to do what you say goes a long way.
Yeah, showing up as well, like doing those little things to put in the work.
But before we move past these lovely pictures of students' heads, GDPR, another thing that I just want to remind people is start small. If your school is looking to establish co-teaching across the school, remember that maybe you don't need every single teacher to buy into this at first. Maybe it starts with one teacher or two teachers and getting them on board and having it spider web out from there. Start small. I started with Kevin. Kevin was my start.
Yep. And then, and starting small also, because relationships take such a long time to grow, and, you're going to be still figuring each other out and your teaching styles and all those things. So yeah, I think starting small. And we have a one comment that from Sarah. We found establishing why we were team teaching first and then drawing up expectations agreements for how this would work best was very helpful for establishing trust. We all believed in the model, and yet anticipating the challenges was something we hadn't anticipated. Once we shared our understandings, it was absolutely the best way of working with the students. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, we're gonna move on because we got to get to UDL here, people. But
that's it. Here we are.
Here we are. And I think this is the crux of it. Does your school have built-in time for collaborative planning? And if not, how are you making and creating time? And I think this is like something that you need, that is so paramount for co-teaching to work, and where I think UDL can be, because where UDL fits in, I think, is the planning. That's where it kind of really goes together. So if there's no planning involved in your co-teaching, there might be UDL, but there could be so much better UDL if there is that planning piece. So this needs to be paramount part of what you're thinking about in a co-teaching model if you want to weave in UDL strategies.
Yes. And just talking about time very, very briefly, as Ken mentioned, there are schools finding very, very creative solutions to collaborative planning times. But kind of like I said about starting little with Kevin, sometimes you have to be very creative with your planning. Whether that's a lunch planning meeting or, staying 15 minutes late one day to have a chat about what's coming up. If your school's not in a place where they've yet to establish time,
dedicated time,
it's so challenging. Being creative in your own time finding as well is really important. So detour into UDL.
Okay. So before
not a detour.
Oh, we're starting up.
People ask me all the time, what is UDL? UDL is Universal Design for Learning, and it is not a new name for differentiated instruction. There is a framework, Universal Design for Learning, and there is a framework, differentiated instruction. And although they can be used to complement each other, they are absolutely not the same thing. So let's talk about a little analogy that I like to use to explain the difference. Imagine for a moment that I was going to have a smashing dinner party. Now, if it was universally designed, I want to make sure that everybody is going to have an awesome meal at my party. And so I'm going to anticipate or predict the variability of possible guests. Now, as my best friends, you're all invited, and you're going to bring partners and friends, and I might not know exactly what they eat, but worry not. I can predict the variability. I'm going to predict that some people might be lactose intolerant, might be vegan or vegetarian, have cultural needs, or they might be picky eaters. And when I can predict this, I realize that it would be a really bad idea to serve a casserole, right? Because imagine you come into my party, you're thinking you're going to have an awesome time, boom, tuna noodle. Oh, I'm going to exclude a lot of people. Recognize the importance of having different options and choices for everyone. And so when I universally design a party, I am going to serve a buffet. And the same thing happens in my classroom. Is we can recognize and embrace the incredible variability of our
Hey both, we've lost the sound, so you might need to put yourself off mute.
We're going to keep going. But Katie Novak is are we muted? No. Okay. Katie Novak is really, really knowledgeable. She has some really great information online. She's an educational consultant. She's written a lot of books. She works for the University of Pennsylvania. She's previously been a superintendent, but we really love that analogy.
Oh, no. You didn't have
Audio. No
Sorry.
wonder people were talking.
Okay.
Well, to summarize her video, it's really quite beautiful, but she talks about throwing a party. And at her party, she's having a buffet, and she's having a buffet because she wants to make sure that no matter who she invites, they have something that they can eat and enjoy at her party. So if someone's gluten-free, they can have options. If someone's vegetarian or vegan, they have options. If someone's lactose intolerant, they have options. Instead of making one thing that she really loves or that she thinks will work for most people, she's having a buffet so that people have choices and options. And this is her analogy for UDL in the classroom.
And so, yeah, basically doing the prep work prior to, the eating, right? So doing the planning prior to the class, so that way students can have options and choice in the process.
We can, is it possible to get our slideshow shared with people at the end afterwards?
Yeah,
because all of them are linked in
We
there.
will send the video and we will send the slideshow to everyone.
Okay.
So you'll get
Okay,
access to
perfect.
the YouTube.
We have another video, so now we know to skip it.
Yep. And now, and just for those of you who are maybe dipping your toes in the water of UDL and learning more about this, Katie Novak has podcasts, she has books, and she is truly, I mean, there's a number of folks in the world that are really have pioneered this, but she's one of the major players. So definitely pick up some of her stuff. Yeah.
So here is our universal design summary in 1 minute. As Katie mentioned in the video that you could not hear, universal design for learning is a framework to improve and optimize teaching and learning for people based on scientific insights into how humans learn. With the buffet analogy, we know that not everybody loves the same foods. Not everyone can eat the same foods. We can expect that same variability in our learners. Not everyone's brains work the same. Not everyone is interested in the same things. So when we're considering universally designing our classrooms, we're keeping that in mind. So this is through, when we're looking at UDL, we're looking at these 3 kind of core components. And we're thinking about multiple means for students to engage in their learning. The why. Why are we learning this? We're looking at multiple means of representation for students. What are they doing? What are they learning? And multiple means of action and expression. How are they learning and how are they demonstrating their learning. There's a lot of really great resources out there to learn more about UDL. If this is something that you're not as knowledgeable about and want to learn more about, CAST is a really great organization that really kind of started it through the idea of assistive technology. But there's a lot of resources, but we don't want to take all of our time
Yep.
teaching you all about it.
And CAST is CAST.
Yeah.
And it looks like, thanks. Yeah, thanks for just saying that the video will work if we keep yourself off mute. So we'll do that. We have a very short video, I think, coming up. And so we'll try that here in a second.
So we muted ourselves.
Yeah, that's what happened. Sorry about that, people. Okay, so here is kind of where UDL, just one little short clip here, where UDL can fit into co-teaching. So let's listen to Elizabeth Stein, and this was done through CAST.
So what UDL really affords teachers is that a common thread where they share a language for proactively planning to make sure that they touch upon the variability of the learners in the classrooms. So they're reaching all learners, and also using the UDL framework as a way to tap into the expertise of each co-teacher as well.
So super short, super sweet. But yeah, basically by using the framework with your planning, that's really going to allow, both teachers to kind of, unlock the power of UDL.
And it comes down to two. Teachers are coming with different perspectives, different backgrounds, different understandings, different ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So having that time to plan together and think through engagement, representation, action, and expression, and challenging each other and asking those questions.
We have a question here.
I heard this.
Okay.
Okay.
So
sorry, let's try.
What UDL.
Hold on, we're gonna just do this.
Okay, this is another reminder to keep it simple. As I mentioned before, or as we've mentioned multiple times, this is coming to a head in your planning, taking the time to think through together. How are we helping students co-design our instruction? What do we need to cover? What does our curriculum say? When I was working with Kevin, these were our plans. We didn't have big elaborate planners that we were using at the time. And so our plans many times were outlines. This means a lot to me. It means nothing to you. There's dates on there. There's like, here are some things we have to get through. There's project ideas. There's little activities written out. I know when I look at what it says, find fractions around the classroom and how do we write it? I know the conversation that existed there. I know that Kevin and I were thinking about, well, we have all of these different students. They're all in a different place with their comfortability around fractions. So how do we meet them all where they are, but while still covering fractions? So I know that this activity was partially a game. They had fractions hidden in the classroom. They had to go find and create pictures of them. And by fractions hidden in the classroom, we didn't even have to create anything. The students had to find them. There were 2 yellow boxes and 3 blue boxes, and that meant there were 2 fifths. So it was creative, but it also gave us a lot of information about where the students are. It let them be at their comfort level. So this meant a lot to me, means nothing to you. So this is where we started with our planning. And again, it was the prioritizing time together. It was prioritizing those conversations and considerations. And yeah.
And I want to point out that, sometimes planning is 10 minutes. It's 5 minutes. It's messy. And it's just jotting down some notes on a Post-it note, and that's it. But that's co-planning, right? That's something. And it's better. It certainly is better than nothing. And I think as long as, both teachers are on board and putting that energy in, even if it can only happen a little bit.
And so the next question is, where do you go from here? Here at ISH, we had this opportunity to work with Beth Stark a couple weeks ago. Beth Stark has previously done, as Amy mentioned in her introduction, webinars for ECIS around LUDIA and UDL. And so as a school, we're moving away from post-it planning, and now it's more intentional at the grand unit level. So this is work that our PYP coordinator, Erin Sherman, has been doing. She's redesigning our unit planners in the PYP for next year. And she is incorporating some of these UDL thoughts, ideas, and considerations into the planners. So these are now conversations that aren't happening, you know, a couple days before the instruction's happening, but they're happening at the very beginning of the units. And you can see in some of these blurbs, how are students co-constructing, how are you considering engagement and student interest when designing the learning?
So if at the very takeaway, if one thing, if you can put down on a little sticky note, engagement, representation, and action and expression, and have that be, you know, available, visible while you are co-planning, then right there you're gonna plan in the mindset of UDL. And weaving technology into your instruction is, of course, another wonderful way to get students engaged.
And again, the beauty of having two adults, two teachers working on something and the skills that they bring. Maybe to you, when you're thinking about UDL and multiple means of engagement, maybe that means like, oh, well, the students can watch a video and other students can read. That is great. That is a great start. They have choice. They have some autonomy and control over the choices that they're making and how they're engaging. But then maybe Ken comes in to meet with me and he's like, oh, Marie, I have this background with tech. Have you ever thought about this, and this as well? And all of a sudden you went from having two really great means of engagement, but you also, now you have four. And then you listen to your students and they go, well, my dad works in space engineering. And I read this thing once, and all of a sudden you're reaching out to a parent and you're listening to students and what they know and what they're interested in and growing from there.
So I guess with this, here's a question. What advantages do you see to having co-teachers in a UDL classroom?
And this can be asking you these questions, take out your phone, start jumping in there. But this can be conceptually. You know, we've talked about, well, there's two brains, there's two cooks in the kitchen. It can be even more practical. I think about things like, well, we talked about all those different co-teaching models. If we're looking for engagement and autonomy,
right,
maybe I want to use station teaching more, and then students have two teachers to support them, but they have all of these different choices that are being supported by teachers to choose from as well, giving them that engagement and autonomy.
Yeah, so you can even put a specific example here, or you can have it be more broad. Having different perspectives to learn from. Two brains are better than one, for sure. And I think shared expertise, right? And individual expertise, like, yeah, like what Maria was saying, I have a little bit more background in tech, but, you know, and teachers, we all bring something to teaching.
I think one of the things I want to talk about very briefly, because it may not have been heard in Katie Novak's video, she did speak very briefly about differentiation. And I think differentiation and UDL often gets muddled together. Bigger selection in the buffet, yes.
Yes.
Differentiation and UDL get muddled a little bit. But the idea, UDL takes a lot of planning, as they've said a lot. There's a lot of upfront work. It is work. Saying that that it's not work, it would be false. But
yes,
it being upfront and intentional as opposed to reactive, or taking that little piece, I have to make this thing for this kid because they, you know, have dyslexia, or I have to do this for this kid because they have sensory processing.
You're a short order cook rather than, you know, like in the analogy that was used earlier, you're going to be a short order cook, you know, for you know, 20, 30, 40 students with a lot of different, you know, food allergies and things. So, you know, I think going into it from the planning side of things, one thing that did pop up earlier that I did want to point out is, having another person in class can help keep the students who do get distracted from their carefully designed task on task. Yeah, for sure. You know, I think the one thing, you know, we don't want to fall into the habit where like one co-teacher is more the you know, disciplinarian, but certainly when one teacher is on stage, if you will, or in the front of the class, and the other teacher is with the students, I think overall students are just have to be on it more, and they can't hide behind their computer and be, playing video games or anything like that. So it does keep students a lot more engaged. Yeah, it's like peer coaching. Yeah, and then diverse perspective, differentiation.
Maximizing student potential, yes.
So we have about 5 minutes left, but I thought we'd open it up to the chat and just see, are there any specific questions, that we could maybe spend the last 5 minutes, reviewing or going over? Anything in particular?
You've been a lovely audience. We appreciate your engagement in our polls and our word cloud and in the chat box.
And again, yeah, UDL, I mean, it derived from CAST, which was, technology focused. So really using the power of technology is one way to really get people engaged. Okay.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, pop them in it. We do have a couple of resources, lots of resources online as well. And we've cited everything in there for deeper
dives. And we'll be
dives.
adding to this too. Yeah.
If you don't have any questions, how I would love to end this.
Sarah has a question, Marie.
Yeah. I can't see any hands or anything. Someone please.
Sarah?
Oh, there it is. There's
sorry, Ken and Marie, this has just been so helpful, and it's fabulous to hear all of your wonderful examples and ideas, and then the participation of all of us. My one question would be, you'd mentioned, Marie, that it wasn't always easy, and that there were some challenging aspects, and you obviously overcame those and moved toward because it's about relationship, which is modeling to the students as well. Fabulous. How did you celebrate your successes and your growing skill sets? That's my question.
How do we celebrate? Well, I was speaking very specific. I mean, I was speaking about Kevin. I've had other relationships in co-teaching partnerships as well. But with that, I was speaking about the lovely Kevin Jones. He and I met weekly. And I will say, I think it's a very positive thing that we do as a whole, as a school. Amy can definitely jump on this. But I would say in most of the meetings we have at our school, one of the things we talk about first are the things that go well. And we would always take the time to do that first. So when we were meeting and first, before planning for what's coming next, reflecting on what's already happened, the first thing we would always talk about are the things that went well. And sometimes it got silly. And I think that's a lot of times what we'd end up reflecting on too. It would be, these things went well, and it went well because we were having fun. And I think just acknowledging that, and also saying things like, you did a really great job when that happened.
And I would actually, when I co-taught with my other teacher, and we see the other hand, we'll get that too, is I would actually, kind of compliment them in front of the students a lot, because I think that goes a long way. I think we all like to be complimented, and I bet, wow, Miss Morrison, that was a really good way of explaining that, or things like that, like kind of taking things also to make thinking more visible, which for the students. And I think that's also something that where the other co-teacher can do, is making that thinking visible, which supports it's like metacognition, and it supports students with all sorts of learning variabilities. But there's another hand here, so we're gonna
Eleni, is that
how
you pronounce your name?
Hello again, Marie. Thank you so much for the presentation. Amy, can I go ahead and mention the trainings we have in the webinars? Okay, so this was hosted by the Inclusive Education Group. Me, myself, and Amy, we are in that group. So we want to thank you and thanking also Sarah at the ECIS and Joe. So we have 4 fantastic opportunities coming up. One is tomorrow with Daniel Sobel. Daniel Sobel is a director of inclusion expert and the chair of IFIP, which is the International Forum of Inclusive Practitioners. A fantastic discussion tomorrow and the presentation by Daniel. Also, Daniel is going to offer a 12-month training at a very good price for ECIS schools. Please check. It's fantastic to check this training spreading over 12 months of the psychosocial phenomenon in schools. And we also have with Linden Services a training with Christina Limbrit and Chineme Upor on the 12th of April and on the 2nd of May. We have demystifying psychoeducational assessments, very important for all learning support teachers. And we also have cultural competency presentation. So thank you from my side and from the Inclusive Education group side. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone for coming. We'll put our
Thank you,
emails
Sarah,
at the
Ken,
end.
and Marie. Thank you so much.
Yeah, glad.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank you
evening.
so much.